Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today we will look at the use of ListViews on Windows Forms. It has been some time since we did any videos on ListViews, so that's what we're going to start tackling today. We're starting off with a completely pristine project here, and we're going to create a dialog onto which we're going to put a button and a list view. So first of all, we will go in and we will create our application and we will save that to disk. Having saved that to disk, we're now going to go into the Forms Designer. And we're going to create a new dialog. And we will double click on the dialog and set a couple of the styles. We will select Caption and Sysmenu and the Minimize box. Once we've okayed that, you can always test your dialog by clicking on the Test button inside the Forms Designer, so you can see what the dialog is going to look like. It has a Close X at the top right hand corner and a Minimize gadget. If we click on the Exit Test mode, we can go back to the dialog. Additionally, in the styles, we're going to center this dialog on the screen. And we will change the name of the dialog to ListView Demo. So now we've got the dialog set up, we're going to put the button on it. We'll put this down at the bottom right hand corner and we will make this an exit button. This will allow us to put some code in here to exit the dialog. Next, we're going to add the list view control. And we'll just drag this into the middle of the dialog. And as you will see, it's demonstrating a list view with 3 columns and many rows. So now that we have this in the dialog, we'll click Save, and we will save to the file we created earlier. And now we've finished the designing of our dialog, we can exit the Form Designer and go back to the main IDE. And if we go down to the bottom of this, it will have in here the copy of the code before we imported. So we'll just take this out completely. And if we have a look at the PB main function, which is the first function our application will execute, it's got 2 lines of code in here. One to initialize the common controls and one to show the dialog on screen to the user. So if we have a look at that function, we can see here is our dialog. PowerBasic uses dynamic dialog tools to make it easier for you to create windows and dialogs. So there is our dialog new command, which will create the dialog itself, and then we have 2 further commands, one to add a button and one to add a list view. After that, we'll see there is another function called sample list view. If we try running our application, we'll see the dialog appears on screen, and not only has the dialog appeared with our list view on it, it's even populated some data into the list view for us. So this is a perfect opportunity to see how list views are actually created and populated, all without you writing a single line of code so far. So if we close this down, and first of all, we will go into the event handler, the callback function. In here are the events that are triggered when the user clicks on something on the form. Before we look further at the code, we're going to put a little bit of code in here, a single line, to allow us to exit the application when the user clicks on the exit button. So in the WN command section, you'll see that our Forms Designer has put the event in for us. But all it's done is to put a message box in to be executed when the user clicks on the exit button. We will remove that and put in the dialog end command. After dialog end, we put in the handle of the dialog that we wish to end. In this case, cb_hdl will close the currently displayed dialog. So let's go back to the function where we set up our dialog. So we can see where the button and the list view are being added to the dialog. They have their positions on screen specified, and they have the name that appears on the button. The sample ListView function is going to allow us to see how a list view is actually populated, so let's have a look at that function. Here is the sample ListView function, and in here we can see some information being passed in. There appear to be three parameters, one being a dialog handle, one being the control handle, and one being the column count. If we look back at where this command was actually called from, we'll see there are the three parameters. There's the dialog handle, there's the handle of the control, and there are two additional parameters, 3 and 30. 3 is the column count. That's obviously the number of columns they want in this particular control, and 30 is the number of rows. So let's have a look further in the code to see what it's actually doing. Well, the first command we can see is this ListView get style X. If we hit the F1 on this to see what this command actually does, we'll see all the ListView commands come up in one section. If we look at the ListView get style X, here is our command. This statement retrieves the current setting of this special extended style and assigns it to the long integer variable. So we move this to the side and have a look. So we're giving it the dialog handle, the handle of the control, and we're populating this variable here with the current style. We're then using the ListView set style command to add to the styles we've already set up. In this case, it's set a value of full row select and grid lines. So we try running the application once more and see how that affects the grid. We can see when the user selects on the list view, the entire row is selected. And we have grid lines. So if we took that line of code out, just to see what difference it would make. And when the user clicks on a row, it's only selecting the first column. The other columns and rows are not doing anything. So that command appears to be quite useful. So let's move on to the next command. Here we have a for next loop, going from 1 to the number of columns that we have specified on the incoming parameters, which in this case is 3. So it's running for for next loop from 1 to 3. And we're using another command called ListView insert column. If we have a look in the help, we can see the ListView insert column is a command to insert a new vertical column into the list view. So we're using this to create each of the 3 columns. It takes a number of parameters, obviously the dialog handle, the control handle, the column that we wish to add, and the next command is the string expression. This describes the text name that you wish to place on the column header. Then we have column width and a format. The column width specifies the width of the column in either dialog units or pixels, depending on how you created the dialog. The value of format describes the position, either left, right, or center justified. The very first column is always left justified. So as we can see in here, we're placing the word column followed by the column number. So if we run the application once more, we will see we're getting column 1, column 2, and column 3. So after the columns are created, we now get to the section of the code that puts sample data into the columns. So this is a nested for next loop. There are 2 for next loops running here. The first one is handling rows, and the second one is handling columns. So for the first row, we're using a ListView insert item command. The ListView insert item command is to add a new row to the ListView control. As this is the first column in a new row, we need to use this command to tell PowerBasic that we're creating a brand new row, and this is the first item on that row. So again, we have the usual parameters, the dialog handle, the control handle, and the third parameter is the item number. This is the row number. You do have the option of using images within ListView controls, but we're going to cover that in a separate video. And the next parameter is a string expression. This is a text that you wish to put into that cell. So in this case, we're putting the word column and the word row, followed by the column number and the row number. As you can see, we're using the using command. Using command is an inbuilt function to format one or more string or numeric expressions. This is very useful and quite powerful when you're using ListViews. So inside this first row loop, we have a column loop, and we're using the ListView setText command. This is operating from column 1 to column number 3, and we're using it to set the text within that row. As you will see from the help, the text that you have passed in for the specified data item is replaced by the new text in your string expression. This command, when it's used on its own, will not create a new row. You must use the ListView insert item first to create the row. So we're specifying the dialog handle, the control handle, the row, and the column. And we're passing in this string. The final section in this is to auto-size the columns. So again, we're going from column 1 to the column number we've passed in, which in this case is 3. As we have 3 columns in our dialog ListView. And the command we're using is this ListView fit header command. There are 2 ListView fit commands. There's a ListView fit content and the ListView fit header. The ListView fit content command will widen or narrow a column based on the data within these cells. Again, taking 3 parameters, the dialog handle, the control handle, and the column number you wish to adjust. This command is ideal when the data in the columns is larger than the column headers. However, if you have data in a column header which is wider than the data in the column itself, you will lose part of the header. The ListView fit header command is useful when you need to take into account both the width of the text in the header and the width of the text in a cell. So it sets the minimum size of the entire column based on the text in both. Therefore, if the text in your header is wider than the text in the data column, then the minimum width of the column will be set to accommodate that. It has one special condition where the specified column is the last column, in our case column 3, then its width is set to fill the remaining width of the ListView control itself. As you will see, the third column takes up the remaining space in the control. However, there's nothing to stop a user moving to the top of a column and adjusting it manually. This without you writing a single line of code. And also the scroll bars work quite nicely to scroll up and down and right and left. So as you will see, you get quite a lot of functionality very easily from a ListView control, as it does allow you to display a basic grid on the screen to the user. What we will do in the next video is we will enhance this ListView further, allowing the user to select columns and pull information out of them, and also to change the look of the ListView itself to make it more user-friendly. However, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.